So a quick sort of overview on data products. This is a topic that is top of mind for a lot of our clients. In fact, the last, I would say, 6-9 months, we have had many different conversations on data products, and especially as it relates to data value extraction, data enablement, how this kind of formulates almost a grassroots strategy for a broader effort around data value measurement. So want to bring this topic to you. And before I dive into the details, just want to introduce myself, and also wanted to give Willem, my co-speaker, an opportunity to introduce himself. My name is Shri Salem. I'm a partner with ZS Associates, and I lead data strategy. I work with clients across the industry on a variety of different data strategy topics, from data strategy formulation, data value extraction, data enablement, and also quite a bit on data innovation and data partnerships. Before ZS, I had leadership roles across the chief data office, data innovation functions, etc. So Willem, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sri. So my name is Willem Koenders. I've spent over 10 years, more than the last 10 years, advising leading companies to how to build and sustain a competitive advantage. I've done so. I spent a couple of years in Europe, a couple of years in the US, Latin America, delivered some projects in Asia, and now actually I'm in Africa. So I hope that I can maybe squeeze in a couple of anecdotes into the remainder of the webinar. And then have spent a lot of time, on the spectrum from on one side, the highest level data strategy, defining and envisioning, all the way down to, data modernization, data governance projects. And then the last 2, 3, 4 years, more and more so about this kind of new kind of not new concept necessarily, but this theme of data products. So super excited to chat about that today. All right, with that, so the agenda for today, we've got 4 points. First, we'll establish quickly what we believe is a definition of a data product. We'll cover how one can assess the maturity of data products. Shri will take care of that part. Then a bit on how data products can be activated and accelerated in practice, and then we'll close with some additional time should there be any questions or discussion. As we go, feel free to put any questions into the Q&A, and Shri and I, to the best of our abilities, will try to take a look as we go. So what's a data product? So the core definition of a data product always includes something like where data from various sources, at least one, but usually more, is consolidated and prepared for multiple consumers to use it for their respective use cases. And so these consumers can be people, they can also be APIs or systems. And to enable that bit in the middle, right, before you have various data sources and you provide it to a multitude of consumers, there's 3 sub-capabilities of sorts that help to bring about a data product. The first bit is data management, where data needs to be labeled. It's in some cases, its lineage may need to be understood. Data quality controls may need to be put in place. The second sub-capability is around core storage and processing, right? So storage is about, the product itself will contain data and information which have to be stored somewhere. Then the processing bit is needed for the data management that I just mentioned, but also for example, for the third sub-capability of AI in data science, right? And more and more so, it's not just about, taking data and preparing it for consumption. It's also very specifically enriching it in such a way so that the consumers, can derive value off of it, in a very immediate fashion. So if I were to summarize a couple of key things about data products, right? They always have data and information. They must have business use cases defined, right? If you don't have use cases defined, even future ones, it's not a data product, right? Because it needs to be created with consumers in mind. There's typically a transition or processing of raw data into curated data, then into enhanced data, and by applying AI and data science and eventually into the final product. I mentioned the AI data science bit is not strictly necessary. It's just, it is being added more and more often. In terms of discoverability and addressability, like it needs to be discoverable, right? For folks to use, for buy or use your product, like it needs to be discoverable, but also addressable, right? Which means that it has a unique location where it can be found. And finally, like managed as a product, Sri will talk a little bit about this in a little bit as well, but if you look at the arrow, the circular arrow in the left visual, like a product is conceived firstly with is created with specific consumers and their needs in mind. But just like any product, like over time, it might need maintenance. It may need to be enhanced. It might even be demised and replaced with a new product, right? So in that case, a critical component is that it is managed as a product, as the name suggests. So with that, why care about data products, right? Sri, we go to the next one. There's 3 key reasons. The first one I kind of touched upon already, use case enablement. Again, it's not a data product if there's not a use case attached to it. But maybe a little bit more interestingly, like the very nature of a data product and that you make it discoverable in a particular way, and more on that later, it also allows you to not just kind of enable use cases, but also like quantify to what extent the use cases are being impacted, right? It could be measuring metrics, that relate downstream in a sense to the use cases, but you can definitely also measure just the data product usage, right? How many people connect to it or processing it or get access to it, et cetera. And the second one in the middle, maybe a little bit less known or emphasized, but it's also a real benefit to streamline data governance, right? So it gives a data product by its very nature means that there's a lot of downstream consumers, right? Which means that if you use them to implement data quality and integrity checks there, while minimizing the number of checks, you actually maximize the impact of those controls. And obviously, a data product here borrows from concept like MDM or trusted sources, et cetera, that have been around for a while. So it's not necessarily entirely new. And then finally, rationalization of the landscape. If you take a look at the visual in the middle, right, where there's 8 data sources and 4 consumers, like imagine that product in the middle wasn't there. Like what would happen? And that's what happens in practice, right? People find the data and they just make it work. So there's a lot of tables, a lot of systems, duplication in technologies, et cetera, et cetera. But once you actually get into step by step, you structurally start to put in place some data products, you should have the ability to save in terms of the cost related to data, technologies, et cetera. The last thought with that is, I would say not to keep that as a passive, afterthought, as part of the data product methodology, but to make that part of the actual business case very much upfront, right? If a certain data product would come about, like what's data and what's technology that you can potentially get rid of. So that on reasons on why they're important. From here, Sri, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Willem. So when we hear about product and maturity kind of in the same sentence, we may be confused thinking this is about product lifecycle, right? So product lifecycle in terms of, this is an early stage product, nascent product versus a late stage product. That's not what we are here to talk about, right? So we're not talking about data maturity in that context. When we talk about data product maturity, we are talking about how well is this product actually set up in terms of extracting value, or does the data product have all the, call it the necessary ingredients or features in order for us to optimize the value extraction, right? And we're going to go through some of these factors or dimensions which are key drivers of data product maturity on the next page. But I would, of course, qualify this by saying all these 10 dimensions or factors are not me-see, as in they're not mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. There are going to be some overlaps and interdependencies. I know this is a lot of words on this page, but I'll just try to maybe walk you through one by one with some examples as needed, so we can understand what these different dimensions are all about. right? So let's start with the first one, which is around product orientation. So when we say product orientation, to Willem's point earlier, is this data product actually being treated fundamentally as a product? So what do we mean by that? Does the product have a specific problem it is solving for? Does the product clearly define who the users or the customer segment is? Does the product clearly have the features defined? How will this product be consumed, as in a typical go-to-market model? When you think about a typical product, what is the value creation mechanism of this product? What kind of value are we expecting this product to create, and how does it really impact the business? Where in the product life cycle is this product? Is this somewhat nascent or mature? Does this product have a product manager of sorts and an owner who really thinks about all these different things, right? So those are some of the key things that we have to think about when it comes to a product orientation. I know many companies have lots of data products, but when you start to dissect it and double click on these different aspects, we may probably not have an answer to all of those questions. So that actually could well impact the maturity of a data product. Let's talk about some of the other factors which are critical in driving maturity of a data product. Awareness is an important one. So for the target segments, is this product really well communicated and marketed to, right? So for the users of this product, do they actually understand clearly what the features of the products are, and are these users really well informed in terms of potential value creation that happens from this product? We could even go as far as saying, is this product actually listed on a catalog, that it is actually findable by the audience that may be seeking this kind of product? So that's on the awareness side. Adoption, I would think somewhat goes hand in hand, or maybe kind of a different aspect or different side of that same coin, if you will, because when we talk about adoption, we are talking about usage and penetration within the intended segments. So for example, if I've built a great product for a marketing team, but only 25% of the users or the intended targeted users are using that product, and the rest are still relying on some non-fact based intuitive decision making, or they're using some other point solutions, right? So in some ways, that is a major problem which affects the maturity of these products. So when you think about adoption, there are several different factors which actually go into that, right? So we are really looking at moving from awareness to adoption and what is really driving us towards adoption. So the next set of dimensions that I'm going to talk about are some of those key things which actually help you gain adoption. So usability is an important one, right? So this is relating to the ease with which you can get access to the product. It relates to the ease with which you can actually ramp up and learn how to use the product. This is the ease with which you can actually get support when you're getting stuck using that product. So this is, again, you need to treat this exactly like a product. When we say a data product, it is no different from a physical product, which is a non-data product. Right? So within a data enablement context, we talk a lot about self-service, right? So unless we build self-service at the grassroots level into a product, it's very hard to change an organization, from a data transformation perspective. So a lot of these aspects are very critical from a data enablement standpoint. The next one, is around trust. So I'm sure you all know what trust means, but when you actually think about what are the drivers of trust and what are the factors from which trust actually stems relating to the data factors, there are many different things around, data quality, that is important for trust, a single source of truth, right? We don't need many different sources of truth. We need a single source of truth so you can actually trust that this product has been built on that single source of truth. Data lineage is an important one. So when it comes to, where is the data actually flowing from into this product, we need to know the lineage. Consistent data and KPI definitions. Again, if I'm building KPIs within the data product, we need to all align that we exactly know what this KPI means. So we are using those metrics, the same way. Actionability, I would think this is probably in the top 2 or 3 among all these features in terms of what really truly drives in maturity. For me, actionability is about your ability to take these outputs, whether these be business metrics or analytical models that are outputs of the data product, and then for you to be able to take those and do something directly in terms of a business action, take an action from that, right? So from an actionability perspective, we can see that there are data products which could be using, for example, descriptive analytics. There could be data products which could be using prescriptive analytics, such as next best actions, right, which could actually be driving more actionability. So the important consideration here is, once you know who you are building this data product for, then you come back and decide, I'm building a descriptive product or a prescriptive product, or does it actually suit the audience, right? So maybe you're building something for a sales cohort that may not have the necessary data interpretation skills. And for them, giving them a next best actions kind of prescriptive product actually improves the actionability. So there is a strong linkage and connection between some of these factors that we're talking. Business impact, again, is primarily the reason why we have these data products and what we can do perhaps with the data products to impact the business. So this is the quantifiable value that is directly enabled by a product to the business, right? So for certain types of products, the value capture can be easily measured. So for example, if you're thinking about a data product which could be a sales prospecting tool, right? Then you don't have to worry as much about measuring the value of the product, because with the prospecting tool, you could easily make a case that, hey, I'm able to identify, call it $100 million of new opportunity, or I'm able to lower my business development cycle from 3 months to 2 months, right? So there you have very meaningful quantifiable value that is coming out of the data product. But for a regular business performance dashboard, type of product, it's very hard to measure the value because those are more foundational in nature. And so when you think about value extraction, you need to almost think about it very differently. Speed is an important one. Speed of the readiness, how quickly can you move from data to insight, I think is an important consideration in the maturity. Interoperability, right? Can your data product interact seamlessly with another data product, or even perhaps with another data asset or data set? Can you build more KPIs or metrics by combining these data sets together or data products together, right? This actually enables you to think about a longer runway or a roadmap and expand the applicability and the scope for a wider audience. And this, again, becomes very important from a scale perspective, especially if you're an organization that does not have a centralized funding model. If you're somewhat decentralized in funding these data analytics projects and investments, then this gives you more degrees of freedom for a suitable business case, which actually taps into use cases across different functions. The last one here is innovation. Definitely an important one. Can your data product help drive innovation? And an example of this could be something like, can you do scenario analysis with your data product, or can you do what-ifs analysis? So let's say you have a forecasting data product. Can you do a scenario analysis on the drivers to understand what happens to your forecast if some of these underlying drivers were to change, right? So enabling you to do that type of innovation is also increasingly important. So I know I went through a lot of different aspects in a fairly short period of time, but let me try to summarize or paint a picture of some best practices and learnings that we have had working with clients on some of these types of engagements. I would say the first one is probably around starting with the end user in mind. So if you are building a data product, or if you're trying to understand the value and the maturity of a data product, it's always important to understand the context in which that particular product is being used, the context in which it fits with the business process. Oftentimes, we have seen that data and technology teams tend to build some of these products themselves, which in itself is a problem because we can't build any of these products without the necessary input from the business user. So that's an important learning for us. Having KPIs for success. Again, we looked at a lot of different considerations here, from data maturity, from value delivery to adoption to awareness. All of these are great KPIs, but I think one probably I was thinking that we should also add to this list, that we don't often talk about, is how does it really truly impact the experience of the user of one of these data products, right? Does it make the life of the user that much simpler? So in one of my earlier roles, we built this fascinating enterprise reporting dashboard by combining internal data sets, internal sales information with external market data. We intended for this to really be applicable to a wide variety of audience and across different functions, from strategy to brand to marketing to even sales and commercial functions and operations, etc. So we had compiled every possible business metric and KPI as part of that in a reporting tool, right? So when we went live, we were very positive that it was going to work. But then 6 months later, what we found out was there were specific functions and cohorts where the adoption was pretty low, staggeringly low, that we almost had to rethink what is going wrong here, right? Because we thought that we had built all the KPIs for those user groups. What is actually happening was, especially within the sales function, we were actually overwhelming them with a lot of these KPIs and metrics when they actually did not know how to exactly take those and use it. We were not meeting the users where they are, right? So that is always a big problem with these data products. So when we think about this, again, going back to the user, what do they actually need, and how are they going to use this KPI within the business process of the broader construct is absolutely critical for us to understand. One more key point on this one, and then I'll move on to the next one. Next topic here is we need to plan for change management. Right? Change management is going to be an important component of this, because depending on the size and the impact of these products, we need to find the early adopters of these products and have them tell the story to the rest of the organization. So if it is a sales focused data product, we need to find some cheerleaders within that organization or that team of users, so they can be early adopters and they can tell the story to the rest of the their team, and that always works much better than telling the story top down, as in senior execs have often gone in and said, hey, I'm using this data product, team, you should also be using it, right? I mean, that doesn't actually work that well. So it's coming from your own peers and from your own functions is actually a better way to drive adoption. So let me move to the next page here. So as you think about data products, again, you're going to have lots of different data products. Where do you actually go with this, right? A very simple way to think about it is obviously in terms of the potential impact of the data product, and then all of these factors rolling into the determining the maturity of your data product. So where you really need to focus is, are there products which are capable of driving very high value and potential to a business, but yet they are somehow low on the maturity? So how could we potentially target those products? Can we do something? Can we pull these levers in order to increase the maturity and the adoption of those products? So that's where this then becomes a very meaningful exercise. We've been doing a lot of work with clients where we actually go through a laundry list of critical data products and almost go through this exact step by step, go through this framework, prioritization of products with business impact, and then start to understand what levers can we pull in order to enhance the maturity. So with that, let me turn it back to Willem.
Yep. Thank you, Sri. So now over to the last part. We're probably going to run over the time a little bit for those, but if you can't make it till the end, there'll be a recording. But the last part is to kind of make it real, right? So how do you activate this? How can you enable this in your organization? So the first one we wanted to mention is strategy and governance, but it might be self-evident, but that's really true. Like if data products are to have the impact as we kind of just outlined, like it should be explicitly referenced as part of your, if not overall strategy, then at least your data strategy. Like why are they important? How are they going to be part of your data governance landscape? How are they part of your architecture, et cetera? And once you have that established, or at the same lockstep, like what's the governance that comes with that, right? Like what are kind of these minimum standards that, sure, if somebody says that something is a data product, they get access to a special pot of funding or technology, for example, but it also implies that certain minimum requirements are perhaps appropriate, right? So strategy and governance is first. Then second is a reference architecture, right? And so I maybe want to draw a parallel with, creating other products like a car, for example. Like you don't want all the individual, let's say model owners to kind of start, creating tires from scratch or developing the glass or like coming up with color schemes. Like there's just a use for making sure that there's kind of a common blueprint, right? You can't design them all at once, but there's a common blueprint to make sure that there's a minimal consistency, that there's synergies, etc. And I'll come back to this one because we have one to present to you in a little bit. So that's the reference architecture. And then the third one here is around the interoperability standards and tooling, right? So the super critical, it was actually called out as one of the separate dimensions by Shri a few minutes ago, but like it's very, like you need consumption, like people need to be able to use it. So being able to standardize, right, the interoperability so that it's consistently reliable, people know, it shows an outlet, but so that you know how to connect into the data product that you're looking for and actually provide tooling for that, right? Like a lot of these, like as long as you have one or like a sort of API platform or maybe some basic ETL, whatever it is in your respective case, like just call it out so that as part of the reference architecture so that it can actually help to drive the consumption and that doesn't drive the issues. Finally, data management hub. Already mentioned it a little bit, like data products should have a minimum amount of data quality standards, for example, implemented, right? You also want to label the data, understand its metadata. Like what you do not want is all data, even if, against or as part of a data mesh or architecture or domain-driven approach, what you do not want is for all of these teams to reinvent the wheel in terms of, how to do data quality, how to capture lineage. In fact, if you don't connect these bits, it actually doesn't drive the value anyway. So specifically in a cloud native environment, like have a central hub where decentralized team can pull those data management capabilities from, right? So those are four very, I think, explicit enablers that once you have them in place, a lot of the other let's say a lot of the implementation can go a lot smoother. So I promise you guys a reference architecture. So I will both give a kind of logical.
Willem, sorry, really quickly, there was a question that came in, and you may be able to answer that using this slide, I believe, which was around: is there a specific type of tech stack for data products, and would you recommend to stick to one vendor such as AWS as we think about data?
I like that. I don't know who that was, but it's very in lockstep because I'm going to get to that in the next slide. So maybe whoever, because I think it was anonymous, whoever posted the question, like maybe raise your hand if the question's still there, in let's say 2 minutes. Because I'll give you the answer right then afterwards, which is it depends, right? I'll definitely never upfront say go with this one particular vendor because it'll depend on your current landscape, the legacy technology that you have in place, etc. But also there is something to be said for if you have one vendor, you can build a relationship. You have the skills in place. It becomes a bit easier. But as I said, maybe let's see in 2-3 minutes if the question is still there. From a technology agnostic perspective or logical, if you will, perspective, like the what you see here is a blueprint for possible data product enablement, right? So somewhat quickly from left to right, there's data sources. Some are internal, some are external. They are ingested or they're being connected into some sort of environment where you see that transition from raw data that is staged into data that's been curated and quality controlled, layered on top certain value enhancing features into the eventual products that are ready to be consumed, which have those three capabilities that I called out earlier, right? So the data management bits, the processing and storage bits, and then data science. So if we then go to the next page, we see we took this kind of theoretical example and just take a look. What does it look like if let's say your organization is an AWS shop, right? And so in this case, it could be that the internal and external data might sit on S3 or file caches. And then there's a whole suite of different connectors that you can bring in, that you can use to bring in those data, right? Kinesis for streaming, Glue, more traditional ETL, data exchange, actually really good for external data, step functions in case you want to have a serverless type of approach to your workflows. EventBridge is also a real critical one in case you, for example, with customer onboarding or transactional, events like that based on an event, it needs to be pushed into a data product. App flow is yet another that's really good to connect to existing SaaS platforms like Salesforce and SAP, for example. In any case, the message being, if you have this type of blueprint, like you give a menu for people to pick from, right? And so in this case, in ingestion, depending on the data you have, if you have these enabled, it's really a matter of just picking whichever one is the right one. Real quick in the middle, in this case, the Glue data catalog with Data Zone can provide that catalog to enable the findability. Lake Formation does the access controls. EMR Redshift can provide the cloud big data or web data warehouse capability. Lambda serverless and EC2, the basic power of the computing power. A whole host of data science applications. I only squeezed 5 icons in the box, but there's even more, right? To comprehend in terms of natural language processing, forecasts, as the name says, to help predict time series, SageMaker for basic ML, et cetera, et cetera. And then all the way to the right, which is actually a very critical component of data product architecture as well, is not to just understand use cases by the type of data they need and the type of use case it is, but also by how they want to connect, right? What's the archetypical way that they want to consume the product? And so in this case, for query and ETL, Glue, Athena, Redshift can be options. QuickSight is a good option for visualization. The same ones mentioned in the middle actually are also an option for AI and data science, also, let's say, on the consumption side of these data products. If anyone here is interested to kind of unpack this one a little bit more, or to take a look at the Azure one or a Databricks one, or the GCP one, or any other stack that is projected onto this, then by all means let us know. But I think just wanted to give this as a very tactical example. I think with that, Sri, go to the next page.
Yeah, I know we are over time here, so I just wanted to spend maybe a quick minute on this. So what does it mean in terms of actually working with our clients, and how does it translate to some of the offerings? Again, here we have 3 different types of offerings. One is around the data product maturity assessment itself, much like what we had showed to you. For each of those 10 dimensions, there are tens of sub-dimensions where we actually have created a maturity assessment offering where we can specifically ask certain questions of each product, and we can get the answers, and that'll give you the relative product maturity as you're thinking about certain products. Asset and portfolio valuation, again, is an important one. Like we talked about, the maturity is a starting point, but then it needs to translate into the valuation. And so this is where we then make the translation into, at an overall portfolio level, what is the value quantification, and then at an individual data product level, what does that value look like? And then foundational enablement type of offerings is also something that we engage with our clients quite a bit, which is really around helping our clients do it themselves in a way that we teach them how to define a data product, and how to bring some of the best in class aspects for a data product to be fully harnessed in terms of value. What are some of the levers that we can pull for enabling move certain data products from a lower level of maturity to a higher level of maturity? So those are, I think that's our last slide, Willem. So maybe we can get into Q&A. Maybe
we had 2 more questions. One was on to see a Azure/Databricks version of the previous page, which I'm happy to take that maybe offline or in a separate request. So maybe I can connect with that person separately, or if anybody else has a different different kind of legacy architecture, then let me know. The other one, let me go back to it, was an example of how value was quantified through a data product. Good question. So maybe I have one, maybe Shrina, maybe you having served in your Coca-Cola or Danone roles, maybe some of those can be interesting. But from my perspective, I have an example of it was the biggest insurance company in Dominican Republic, and so they were interested. They had, for legacy reasons, had separate quote unquote cores, right? They had separate one for, if I recall correctly, individuals, families, small businesses, et cetera. And so there was not really any sort of connection between them. It's like a very common, I would say, pattern. And so what we did there was define a data product in terms of what's the minimal kind of product that you would need to drive a more effective marketing across these different kind of lines of business. And so that's what was done, right? There was not a full MDM, but a part of an MDM was kind of created, like how do you match them, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, eventually there were two measures that were most dominant. Both were double-digit increases, right? One was around along some other performance metrics. One was around like the personalized marketing campaigns, like how many of those converted. So that was one that it was somewhere 50% or more. That was better. And then one that's slightly lower was around people coming in with specific requests, but not being able to service them because not having the right data available. That was also a more cost-cutting type of exercise. So hope that that was one answer that I thought was pretty powerful back in the day. Sri, do you have an example?
Let me comment on that, Willem, really quickly, while maybe you can take a look at another question that came in. Maybe we'll keep it to that question, and then we'll end the session. So, just on the data product value quantification aspect, and again, we have an offering which essentially takes some of these things that we talked about, not really just at the business impact level, because at the business impact level, you're going to be looking at revenue, operating efficiency. You're likely also going to be looking at customer experience, customer service, responsiveness to the market, etc. So we have lots of those at the business level which we can quantify, but then it's also important to quantify some of the underlying KPIs which get to that, right? So when I say underlying KPIs, those are around time to insights. Those are around actionability of those KPIs and information. Those are around how widely can this be used within the organization, this data product. Now, is that meant specifically for one particular cohort, or is it broader than that? So what we have done is we have taken these KPIs or metrics at different levels, not only at the business impact, but also at the lower grain. And we have started to quantify that, and we have created an accelerator, so to speak, which basically brings all this information together and can give you like a one number score almost, right? I mean, in terms of what is the value of your data product. So Willem, do you want to take that other question on data governance?
Yeah, I read through it while you were answering. And so if I were to summarizing it, someone who asked a question like, are there any kind of lessons learned or best practices or principles if, for a company that's been, it's somewhat new to data governance, digital journey only started a couple of years ago. So it doesn't necessarily have that legacy of doing data governance programs. Like if I'm kind of paraphrasing, but if that, and then how are there any best practices also recognizing that data governance is seen as a, slowing teams down and auditing how to do their jobs instead of kind of value creating? Like, I don't know, but that is almost the perfect scenario for like data products, right? Like you have to couple the data governance, like and be aggressive about it, right? Like the active, explanation of what is a data product, how is it actually going to drive your business, like what you're doing today. Like I don't know what sector this example is in, but I'm sure you can ask the business some questions around things that hurt today, right? It take them time, or things go wrong, or operational risk, or whatever it is. And so the data products are defined for the data that's really critical for your day-to-day business. Like that's for that to be reliably provided, you need data governance, right? There's just an insistence on that message where in one piece we'd written that you have these offensive, benefits that a lot of companies, would like to buy in value creation, customer experience, et cetera, et cetera. But they are only possible when your defensive kind of capabilities are there, right? So what the data is, where to find it, et cetera. So I feel that there's just a bit of education going on there in terms of that you can help, explain how how data governance plays a critical role. So that's one part of the answer. The second answer is similarly, actually good news for this company is that you don't want to do the legacy data governance, right? You don't want to have an army in the center that starts manually tracking data lineage, separately away from the source, start doing, data governance work. What you like to do is build it in, like intelligently, close to the source, into the fibers of your data infrastructure, right? Like what you don't want to do is make the mistakes in a way of some other companies did in the last decade or two. Well, easy to say with hindsight, right? But like, is what you don't want to do is replicate those big, massive offers. Like it doesn't have to be expensive. It's more about like, if you change something and if you modernize something, tweak it, right? Tweak it so that the APIs that you create anyway also abide by your interoperability standards, right? If you build these APIs again, anyway, to stick to the example, just make sure that there's a mini script that also makes it automatically identifiable for lineage, right? There's just things that actually don't really cost any time. And so hence shouldn't be a hindrance or slowing teams down, that actually will have a massive impact down the road anyway. So that would be my somewhat long answer maybe, but like, I hope that covers the question. Whoever it was, if you want to raise your hand, if that made sense, or if you have another question, feel free.
Again, I know we are limited by the time here, but please do engage with us in offline if you have some of these and other questions, and happy to get on a quick chat and give you all more perspectives on these topics. So thank you again for all of you for joining this webinar. I know we ran over a little bit, but I really appreciate you joining with us today. Thanks so much.